Hi, boys and girls. Today we're getting ready to read Chapter 2 of Who Was Sacagawea, which is called Visitors. The visitors we're going to learn more about are Lewis and Clark, and there's a video that you can watch to learn more about them and their expedition and who they were on BrainPop today. Let's get started with our book. 2 centuries ago, the United States was much smaller than it is today. It only included the land from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River. The country got much bigger in 1803. That year, France sold our young nation 828,000 square miles of land west of the Mississippi. This was called the Louisiana Purchase. It doubled the country's size. The region was later divided into 15 states. So again, we were broken into 13 colonies at the time, not really just states. And then we brought this new land under Thomas Jefferson's presidency. So you can see it about doubles, and we have about a third of our country to go. Much of the new land was unexplored. What did it look like? Who lived there? What plants and animals might be found? President Thomas Jefferson planned an expedition to head northwest to the Pacific Ocean, which is over here. The explorers would travel mainly by river. They would make maps of the land. They would trade with Indians along the way. The voyagers would do more than visit the territory of the Louisiana Purchase. They would also explore what is now Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. Great Britain also had its eye on this territory. Jefferson wanted American explorers to get there first. That would strengthen U.S. claims to the region. Nobody stopped to think that the land already belonged to the Indians. 2 army men would lead the expedition. So here's Thomas Jefferson, and then here are our army men that we're talking about. One was 29-year-old Meriwether Lewis. He was President Jefferson's friend and personal secretary. Lewis picked William Clark as his co-captain. The 33-year-old Clark was a tall, friendly man with red hair. Clark's first task was to find men for the expedition. He and Lewis needed men who could hunt, build boats, and forts. They needed men who could handle horses. President Jefferson wanted a record of the trip, so men who could keep journals were also needed. So not everybody at this time, remember, went to school, those one-room schoolhouses. A lot of them stopped because their families needed them to help manage the farm. So being able to read and write and keep a journal was important to be a part of the expedition. Being able to hunt was important. Creating a map of the area that they were exploring, where the ponds were, the rivers were, mountains, hills, different things like that. Being able to ride a horse, and being able to build things such as boats and forts for them to live in during their travels. We'll learn more about this fort a little later. Most of what we know about Sacagawea has come from these journals. Please remember that during this time we really didn't have photographs and things. They didn't have cameras like we do today, so a lot of the pictures that you see during this time are actually drawings and artwork, not just photos. So nobody actually knows what Sacagawea looks like. We just know from the journals that these men took, and that's how we've learned a lot about her. Captain Clark gathered 43 men. They called themselves the Corps of Discovery. Several spoke French. One knew Indian Sign Language. Another played the violin. He could entertain the men when they were far from home. Clark's slave, York, also made the trip. One member of the group had 4 feet. Captain Lewis brought along Seaman, his 140-pound Newfoundland dog. So here's a picture of his dog. On May 14th, 1804, the Corps of Discovery set out from St. Louis. So here's St. Louis, this green star right here. They began rowing up the Missouri River in a barge and 2 smaller boats. By late October, the time the Indians called the Moon of the Falling Leaves, fall, the explorers had reached central North Dakota. So this red line on your screen is the Missouri River, and we started in St. Louis, and Lewis and Clark used their boats to go up the river to North Dakota. Do you remember who's in North Dakota right now? These are the boats that they took, by the way. This is a keel boat, and this is a pirogue, or the way I want to say it is pierogi, but that just makes me hungry. This was where Sacagawea now lived with Charbonneau. The voyagers stopped in the area to camp for winter. There, they built a cluster of cabins, which they called Fort Mandan. So remember that picture I showed you before? This is what Fort Mandan looked like. This is the fort that Lewis and Clark's group built. This is what it looks like kind of in the snow, and this is what it looks like without any surroundings. And then you can see all of the individual doors. Those were the cabins that they stayed in. You can see that they had like a front gate, things like that. To explore Fort Mandan more, you can use your Google Slides to actually access Google Maps and walk around the satellite view, or you can research their actual website. Soon, Charbonneau heard interesting news. Lewis and Clark were looking for one more person for their expedition. At one stage of their journey, they would need horses to help them cross the Bitterroot Mountains. They hoped to get them from the Shoshone Indians, who were famous for their horse breeding. The explorers would need someone who could speak to the Shoshone. So I'm just going to show you this picture. It shows you the Native Americans that already are in the Minotry that Sacagawea lives with right now, and then it shows you the boats coming over as Lewis and Clark landed in South Dakota from the Missouri River. Charbonneau thought his pregnant wife, Sacagawea, brought his pregnant wife, Sacagawea, to meet Lewis and Clark. She could speak Shoshone. Remember, that's who she was kidnapped from. He told them. She was Shoshone. Charbonneau wanted to go along too. He knew French and some Minotry. He could also help the explorers. The captains asked Bird Woman and Charbonneau to join them. They agreed to pay the trader $500 in the early 1800s. This was a fortune. Sacagawea and her husband were now part of the Corps of Discovery. The couple moved into Fort Mandan for the winter. They shared a cabin with Lewis, Clark, and York. So again, each of these little rooms here are a cabin. I'm going to get back to that. And so now we have Lewis and Clark, Sacagawea, her husband Charbonneau, York, who is, I'm just going to look back, forget who he belonged to, Clark's slave. And the five of them are all staying together in one of these cabins. Okay? This is another place. It says Inside Mandan Earth Lodge. This is what the shelters look like for the Minotry in North Dakota. So the women built these, and they actually seem to have to remake them every 10 years or something like that. So again, this is something you can explore on today's slides. So this is what the outside looked like. There was a hole in the middle. Where's the sun shining? That's where their fire would go. You have their skins and all kinds of things. So today this is a museum, and you can actually go there, but you can see the different tools, and they try to set it up differently so that you can learn about it. So you can see the difference between the Native American home versus the Lewis and Clark American, like white man's home. On February 11th, 1805, Bird Woman was about to have her baby. To hurry along the birth, she was given a special powder. It was made from a rattlesnake's tail. Ugh. She drank it with water. 10 minutes later, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Charbonneau named the child Jean Baptiste. Clark called the baby Pomp. He called Sacagawea Janie. Okay, so as we move on, we are not going to call Sacagawea's child Jean. We are going to refer to him as Pomp. The captains hoped that Sacagawea would be of help on the long trip. They had no idea just how valuable she would be. So this is a picture Again, just a sketch, somebody kind of pretending to be, or like an actress. But all of these have Sacagawea and her baby, because she did make this entire journey with Pomp on her back. You can see some of her statues along the trail as we learn about the expedition. You can also see one of her statues in Washington, D.C. Okay? Tomorrow we'll read Bird Woman's River, Chapter 3. Hope you enjoyed!